The real development of TRE as we know it today started in Sudan in 2002. I was invited there to teach trauma recovery work to southern Sudanese people because this was a time that there was a war between the North and the South. So the video clips you're going to see here are some of the experiences I had, and I'll try to narrate you through it so that you can see the development of TRE and understand how it was developed to be very simple, not complex, very easy to replicate, and by people who did not have clinical backgrounds at all because it simply didn't exist there. But you're going to see how they were able to receive what I was teaching and then implement it themselves. Now, traveling here was just about impossible because there was no infrastructure at all because there was no money for it and the country was at war. And so we would drive for long stretches, 19 hours a day. Sometimes we needed to have military protection because the roads were dangerous. We passed some interesting sites along the way that you would only see in third world countries that are experiencing war, such as this multi-million-dollar anti-aircraft machine gun sitting next to a mud hut. Other times, the roads were almost impossible to travel through because the holes in the roads were so deep, filled with water. Many times we didn't even know if we were going to lose the car itself in the potholes. Now, if we were lucky, we were able to travel by small planes, and these planes usually carried supplies. That's why they were going there. We simply hitched a ride on the plane. And the people would all come out to greet the plane, and that's where I begin to meet them and begin to develop the relationships with them. Other times, we traveled on Russian cargo planes that were flying in different supplies for people, and we were just sitting in the back with the cargo. We would greet the people, then we would explain why we were there and what we were going to try to help them understand regarding trauma, their experiences of war, and how can they help themselves to overcome these negative experiences that they might have had in terms of stress, tension, and anxiety. Now, the living situations were really quite simple, but honestly quite lovely because it helped me, at least, to embrace the simplicity of humanity and the environment. And so here's a couple examples of places that I stayed in. And also, here's a couple examples of places where I would be teaching. So we taught in whatever environment was available at the time for these people, and it was quite lovely. Many people would walk for hours to come to hear the lecture and to learn the exercises, because even though we were operating out of one small village, it was connected in a network to maybe 10 other villages that could have been a mile or two away, and people would all communicate to each other and walk to all these different places so they could all gather together. They actually made it a big social event in many times because they spent so much time getting there and spending so much time being there and so much time getting back. So they would make a sort of event out of the whole thing rather than just coming for 1 hour of teaching. These were some of the richest, most precious times for me because I got to see people in their traditional culture, which they had so much pride and so much respect, not only for themselves in their own particular tribe, they called it, but in other tribes as well. And it was this that they were trying to keep alive and to enjoy, even though their country was experiencing war and severe trauma. So this was the setting and the environment in which I was teaching TRE to large populations. Now I want to show you a little bit of what the teaching looked like, what the exercises were like, and what the results were in terms of their feedback and their experiences of TRE. I would always teach them first about the anatomy of trauma so they could understand why they were going to do the exercises and how these were going to help relieve the stress from the trauma.
It does this, and another muscle exactly like it on this side comes down around here and connects into this leg bone. In the biology
Directly connected with the anatomy of trauma is the biology of trauma. It's important for the people to understand the chemicals that are being created in the body because they will have to release these chemicals later on to return their body to a normal state after trauma.
One of these responses is called the hyperarousal continuum. The other one is called the dissociative continuum.
So all the time after I was done teaching, and we would do this twice a day, we would listen to the lecture and then we would do the exercises right afterwards so that I could draw the relationship between what I was talking about anatomically or physiologically, and they could experience it in their bodies because I knew they were going to teach this in their own language and in their own concepts, not the way I was teaching it, but in a way that it could be received by the people in their own culture. Specifically because I was teaching in a culture that was experiencing war, I wanted to address the concepts of the enemy image syndrome, which I talked about because I knew it was something they could relate to and understand, and it was very important for the psyche of trauma to be able to know how to deal with this.
Is that what you do is you build an image of the other person as the enemy. So that you build the image of Arabs as enemies, okay? And that becomes all Arabs. Or you build the image or the Arabs are building the image of Christians as enemies, okay?
Now, almost all my teachings had to be translated from English into Arabic for the general population or other dialects that were being spoken in southern Sudan.
ناس رجال بدقوا نسوانهم يعذبوهم يبهدلوهم وتلتلوهم لأنه الله خط في المرأة قال ورجلك يسود عليك ولكن انت شنو انت بتشتاقي
After we would do the teaching and do the exercises, then we'd have them break up into pairs and talk about their experience and journal it. They actually were reflecting with one another on what did these experiences of war have on their personal lives. Now, as I was doing these trainings throughout the many different villages and cities and countrysides that I was teaching TRE in Sudan, they were catching on immediately to, we have to figure out how to bring this out to the larger population. They really liked TRE, but their immediate thought was, how do we bring it to our entire population of people, which is what I loved. This is where the whole concept of group TRE came in, and needing to be able to do it without any type of professional like myself, that they could guide themselves through this process and guide their own family members and members of their own village through the process as well.
And one of our colleagues also expressed that perhaps a group that could be more aware of this healing could help. And I see if that group exists, could be organized at a level of parishes so that a wider group can benefit of this healing process.
For example, at the beginning of the workshop, maybe the first 20 minutes or the half an hour minutes, we do some exercise and we continue with our workshop. This is what I'm planning in the future. If there is a training workshop for the women, to introduce this trauma program also, so that the women, they will benefit from this and they will discover a lot as we did in January.
We will put it as a week, or in the week of orientation we shall put it also to be as one of the topic we are going to give to the students.
Now we're going to hear from one of the leaders in southern Sudan who knew of all these different groups that I was teaching all over the place, and he talks about what's the feedback that he got, how does he think people received it, do they think it was helpful for them, and does it have value in terms of something that can be applied in southern Sudan during the time of their war and political violence.
I think it has been useful. It has been so useful for so many of the participants. I mean, those who have gone through this workshop have all expressed their real appreciation for it, and even the kind of transformation or change that took place in them. I mean, so many were complaining of headaches when they came in. They said they got out from there all refreshed. People who were not sleeping at night have begun falling asleep even before they reach their houses. And people with bad joints have straightened out. And the good part of it is sort of putting the people the desire to share what they have learned with other people and to talk about it, so that a word which was not being used frequently in the diocese, like trauma, has now become a common word among the people. Yeah. And many people already trying to book the next workshop, and I think it has made an effect on the people. I think it will be one of the most useful programs for us during this time here of the war, because the more we become aware of the stress and trauma situations, the more we discover that the life of people here is very much affected by it.
So that was my experience in Sudan, and that is the origins, really, of TRE. These are the people who brought its energy and spirit onto the planet long before I brought it into what we call the Western world, and they are the people that still carry on TRE in Sudan, even though there still continues to be political violence. So I hope you enjoyed this. I wanted it to be both educational, informational, and entertaining in the sense that there's humanity involved here. And TRE was born out of some of the depth and the pain of humanity. And yet, in the depth of that pain, there was joyfulness, there was celebration, there was relationship, and it was a beautiful, life-changing experience for me.